It's This Is Going Well, I Think, with David Cooper. I am your host, David Cooper. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, the show where no one's listening, no one cares, the show where every episode's the last episode, a fantabulous lineup tonight. That definitely being a word. In about 10 minutes' time, science educator Dan Riskin is going to tell us about a study that once and for all proves whether astrology has any predicting power over your personality. That's right, someone did the science. And we're going to talk about it. And Dan also wants to share about some crazy headphones that in a room filled with people, all you have to do is look at someone and these wacky AI headphoney thingies can remove what everyone in the room's saying and just play for you the one person you're looking at. Kind of spooky. Sounds like something out of Spycraft. All that and more with Dan Riskin. Then the Supreme Court in Canada regrettably declined to allow a group of sex worker advocates to weigh in on a case that could have been the source of a landmark ruling to give those sex workers charter rights. So we're going to talk to someone from the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform to drill into this story and why this is such a disappointing outcome for human rights. Then we'll talk the ruling out of New York of former President Donald Trump being guilty of crimes. We will talk to our senior Washington political correspondent, a man who goes by the name of Tony Five, to get an update from that story. I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a great lineup. And I know what you're also thinking. Why is David saying, I know what you're thinking, when that's not what I'm thinking? Good question. First, this. Here's a news story that puts your worst neighbor disputes to shame. North Korea, the friendly isolationist nation, has decided to express their displeasure with South Korea by sending them floating gifts across the country's border. The friendly nation of North Korea launched over 260 balloons filled with feces and trash across the border. Yes, you heard that right. Shit and garbage. And while you might complain about your noisy neighbors, North Korea has taken it up a notch with airborne poop bombs. I guess those northerners needed to share with those southerners that they were having a crappy day. Get it? Because there was poop in the balloons? Crappy? Is this thing on? Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korea's supreme leader Kim Jong-un, defended the poop-filled parcels as being, quote, sincere presents for the, quote, goblins of democracy in South Korea. And while I don't agree that South Koreans are goblins of democracy, I do agree that if you want to deal with goblins, sending them poop balloons isn't actually the worst way to do it. The Supreme Leader's sister even said this was the North Koreans' way of expressing their freedom of expression. It's like performance art, except it stinks. Now, I'm not defending this absolutely hilarious provocation by the North, but it appears to be in response to South Korea allowing defectors, those who escaped from the North to the South, to send back balloons from whence they came containing anti-North Korean political materials, which might undermine their supreme leader's rule. Earlier in the week, South Korea's military confirmed that they saw the largest ever balloon launch from the North, and these balloons had timers and explosives to make the balloons burst at just the right time to scatter poop and trash across South Korea, and some even reached the capital, Seoul. It's like a twisted version of a Thanksgiving parade. But instead of floats, you get fetid surprises. And the UN and the United States are getting involved. The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff and the United Nations Command are investigating the incident. They call this a violation of the 1953 armistice agreement between North Korea and South Korea. And in case you haven't heard the recent news, North Korea and South Korea don't exactly get along. South Korean authorities have advised people to steer clear of any suspicious objects floating in the air and report them to the police or the military. So if you're in South Korea and you see something that looks like a birthday balloon but smells like a porta potty, maybe don't pop it. Maybe run. And as if launching fecal balloons wasn't enough, North Korea fired off about 10 short-range ballistic missile tests very early in the morning. Talk about overcompensation. So this has put South Korea's military on high alert. They're keeping an eye on these stinky and potentially deadly provocations. All this while Kim Jong-un's sister probably giggles over her cereal at all the chaos. I'd always thought North Korea couldn't outdo Dennis Rodman playing a game of basketball with their leader, but things have gotten even weirder than I could imagine. They've mixed guerrilla warfare with potty humor. And if they're trying to win the world's worst neighbor award, they might have just done so. So in the game and intrigue of international relations, always expect the unexpected. And maybe carry some spare toilet paper. I don't know. I'm going to try something a little bit different right now. Something that's fun for at least me, and I hope you like it too. Last night I was on my friend's radio show, Jim Richards. It's a commercial radio show. And Jim was talking about how some AI screen reader or something like that was making his life easier. He just said the word easy, and I got the "that was easy" button from Staples stuck in my head. And I just lost it. And then Jim wanted to talk about some serious stuff, like a celebrity who took his own life, but I was in hysterics. It was one of the worst 2 minutes of radio I've ever been on, I gotta say. I'm laughing about a "that was easy" button. He's trying to take it in a serious direction. It was chaos, and I hope you like it. Here it is.
But my point is, there's a button on this app where if it's like a 42-minute article, you could hit summarize and it could get it down to like a minute.
Wow. That's like what they used to sell that at Staples, that big red button, but it didn't work. You'd press it and it would say that was easy, but then it wouldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
This is the real that was easy button.
Exactly. All right.
Did you ever get a that was easy button? Those things were amazing. What an amazing product that was. I don't think
was so
make them
great.
Anymore.
Okay.
Oh my God. A big red button, and then when you press it, it says that was easy. That's an amazing product.
Way to go. You're doing well, right? Right now, you're doing really well.
Why, does it sound like I'm having a
No.
breakdown?
I mean, last week you weren't feeling... You know what?
Screaming about that was easy.
No, I think you're doing really well. I'm glad.
Are you worried about me? I'm screaming about that was easy button, and you're like, David's finally lost it. He's finally lost it.
You know what I was thinking about earlier this week? And it reminded me of, and I hate to be a bummer here with only like 3 minutes left, but that Anthony Bourdain story, like, I don't know why. I'm like, I don't know why that resonated with me more than any other celebrity death, but it really did.
You weren't alone. A lot of people were struck by that. Yeah.
And so the story of this golfer, I'll be honest, I've never heard of him before, but to hear that he was a named golfer to people who follow golf, and just, Googling and finding out how much he talked about his mental health and quit drinking and all this kind of stuff, took himself out of this tournament. And the next thing everybody knows, he took his own life. Were you following that story?
No, not at the time, no.
All right, I'm bumming you out right now.
No, it's okay. Let's talk about golf. I want to talk about that was easy. You want to talk about suicide. It's fine. That was easy.
Yeah.
I want a that was easy. Maybe I can get one on eBay. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, all right, never mind.
It was amazing. It was the stupidest thing. It was like a pet rock. You'd think it wouldn't sell, but it sold.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's great.
Anyway, your AI 1 minute summary reminded me.
No, I was talking about. I was talking about.
Oh yeah, Anthony Bourdain. Let's talk about that. What do we want to know?
No, I was talking about Grayson Murray. I just found it. It doesn't sound like you want to talk about it.
No, let's talk about it. Talk about anything, Jim.
And maybe. Okay, I just found it very kind of like heartbreaking, and just it kind of overwhelmed me for a bit.
I don't know what to say. I'm in a mental space where I'm not there with you. But let's come back to this tomorrow night. I'm sorry, Jim. I was all hopped up, and you wanted to be pensive, and we just couldn't meet in the middle. But it's all right. Sometimes that happens in radio. Listen,
you were great tonight. You've been great all week. And I have been, there are nights where I'm like, okay, David saved that. And then there are other nights where I'm like, okay, I think I won. I think you've won the week.
Wow.
I think we have to have a winner at the end of every segment. And I think that was easy. I think you're winning so far.
That was easy, Jim.
A lot of winning.
$8.99 on eBay. I'm buying one. I used one. They don't make them anymore.
The Staples button?
Yeah, the Staples button.
Okay.
It's easy. I'm losing it, Jim. I'm losing it. Thanks for having me.
Have a great night.
Okay, science educator Dan Riskin is coming in just a moment. Dan's going to tell us how zodiac signs have now been proven to either have or not have, the answer may surprise you, an influence on our psychology. And he's got more science stories. Will we get to them or will we just talk BS? That is an exercise left to you, listener. Stay with me. We are here with science educator to talk science in a segment I call Science Talk with evolutionary biologist and former host of Daily Planet. Do you like being announced as that? I don't know.
That's a long title. I like that you call it that big run-on sentence. It's a segment that I call, and then you just like go on and and really string together a...
I could have just said the name of the segment instead of saying this is the...
What is the name of the segment? Is this a named segment on your show?
Science Talk, I guess. I don't know. I should start naming...
Science Talk?
I should start naming things.
That's good. Science Talk is good.
You like it?
Yeah, I think we should do that. Nobody else uses that name. That's good. Let's use it.
I've used This Week in Science with you, but I feel like that's...
Yeah. This Week in Science is used by others because it almost spells twist. And you can say This Week in Science and Technology, and then it does spell twist. And then you feel like you're really quite cool. And then you're like, let's do the twist. And then you play the music, and nobody likes listening to that noise. I mean, the twist is fun, like maybe one wedding out of 5, and then like you may not hear it again for a decade. But the twist is not... It's not worthy of the way it's revered and revived constantly.
Do you know my agent yesterday says at the beginning of these segments, you have to say who your guest is. You're not doing a good job with your intros, your resets, and your outros. Resets being saying who guests are mid-interview. I haven't said your name yet. You know that?
Okay. No, you have. You've said my name, and you've said that I am the former co-host of Daily Planet. You said my name.
I said you were the former co-host of Daily Planet, and I said former host, and then I said, do you mind being introduced that way? I did not. You haven't been introduced.
So nobody knows who I am yet. That could be Zaya Tong.
Nobody.
They have no way of knowing.
No way, other than the fact that I said it 17 times earlier in the show. Daniel K. Riskin,
Yeah, that's me.
PhD.
Yes.
You should do you get something if you do a postdoc? Is it like post PhD?
No. Postdoc is just a nice, like it just means you have a job that you're not a professor, but it's any job that you're not a professor. Like, it's kind of like a weak job. He's got like a 3-year contract. Poor guy has a PhD from a fancy university, and that's all he can get. We'll call it a postdoc. That'll make it sound funny. But yeah, some people get confused. They think it's another degree. Like, oh, he's still a student. He's a postdoc. I'm like, no. Postdoc means you're done. You just...
What if you're a doctor who works for the Postal Service?
Now you're talking. Or what if you are a doctor that works on pieces of cylindrical things that are stuck into the ground? And that is what you're focused on.
Like lampposts. We need a doctor. It's a really bad lamppost problem.
Yeah, or somebody tried to climb it and they slipped and fell, and now we need a proctologist and a postdoc.
Someone who specializes in lamp-based injuries.
Yes. Yeah, somebody who can make the joke, wrecked him, damn near killed him in the most possible ways. That's like what they specialized in during their postdoc.
Is this like a release for you? Because I feel like in your other things that you do, those less important media appearances where you get paid for, you don't get to be wrecked him, barely knew him. You don't get to say things like that.
You don't get to make those jokes as often. Although I did have a funny experience. I'm gonna drag your friend Jim through the mud a little bit.
Jim Richards, love him, know him, love him.
Love Jim Richards. So Jim Richards has this thing where he likes to poke fun at the show I'm on the next day. I'm on with him in the evening, and then the next day I'm on during the daytime with Vashi Kapelos, who is a great host and more politically minded than Jim. And they're two very different shows, and he likes to poke fun at that and say things like, well, you can't say that on Vashi's show, and this and that and the other thing. So last time I'm on Jim's show, he's like, when you go on Vashi's show, you should say something about Jim Richards. And I said, sure, I'll mention your name. And he said, I bet you won't. And I said, I will. And so then we had this it was like this dare, like, can I work the word Jim Richards into whatever I'm talking about science-wise? Can I just mention Jim Richards at some point during the appearance? And he's like, okay, I'll be listening. I'm like, okay, good. So I did it. I managed to pull it off. I fully named Jim Richards out of the blue. And Vashi was like, why are you talking about Jim Richards? And it was like a glorious moment. And I don't think Jim listened. And now he's going on vacation. And I feel like I just did all that work for nothing. It's like he set me up. He's like, oh yeah, we'll be cheering for you. It really brought me back to what it was like to be a teenager and be dared to do something and then to do it and then realize nobody actually cared if I did it. And that's what happened there.
Sounds good. It reminds me of a This American Life piece on NPR where Malcolm Gladwell tried to work the phrase perverse and often baffling into his headline. And he had a competition with his coworker. Who can get this in the newspaper first?
Nice.
And he described it as, not only does the thing has to be perverse, it also has to baffle you, but it's not sufficient for it to baffle you once. It has to baffle you, then not baffle you, and baffle you again to be often baffling. It must oscillate. And he ended up getting it in. I don't think the story's true.
Of course he did.
He told it in The Moth in New York. I want to rewind to when we talked about how to name this segment. You said Science Talk. Sorry, I said Science Talk.
You said Science. Don't throw me under the bus with that terrible name.
We talked about This Week in Science. That's a name you use with Jim Richards, the whole thing. Okay.
No, that's nerd news. It's nerd news with Jim Richards. Yeah.
I'm thinking we use ChatGPT to come up with a name for this segment right now. What should
okay,
our
I'm in.
prompt be? Can you come up with 10 segment names? Example.
Wait. This is you got to say some things. Like you got to tell ChatGPT what it is. You got to make a character for it. Like ChatGPT, you are a genius radio producer who is known across the industry for coming up with great names for segments where that are clever and witty and also just like earworms that live in your brain forever. Something like that. You got to really build up its
forever. You know my word per minute. I'm not trying to brag here.
That's really good if you kept up because I was going fast. Did you really type that fast?
I'm done. I'm about 120 to 140. I don't have high accuracy though.
Okay, well that's okay. So instead of a brain worm, it'll be a brain word, but whatever, it's all good. ChatGPT can handle a certain number of typos anyway. So
you are a genius radio producer who's known across the industry for coming up with great names for segments that are clever and witty and are also earworms that live in your brain forever.
Great. All right, we are two charismatic, well-loved.
We are how do I spell charisma?
Charismatic, CHARIS.
Wow, look at that. And well-loved, what?
Radio personalities. And this segment is focused on science that is entertaining, baffling. Wait, perverse and yet often baffling. How's that?
Wow, really coming together here.
Yeah.
Perverse and often baffling. Got it?
Yes, that's what it is.
It is, yeah. How about educational? That is marginally.
It does oscillate. You got to admit, it oscillates from unbaffling to baffling. It goes back and forth. It's often baffling.
It's true, and we often delve into perverse topics like raccoon penises the other day.
Sure.
Wow, we are perverse and often baffling. Okay, we are two charismatic and well-loved radio personalities, and this segment is focused on science that is marginally educational, perverse, and often baffling.
Great. Okay, perfect. Now, give us some titles, and I don't know, see what it gives you, but sometimes ChatGPT, when you ask for a title, it gives you colon titles, like blah, blah, blah.
Give us some segment names for our work that are, let's say, 8 words or less. Give us 10 segment names for our work that are 8 words and less. Science shenanigans, weird, wild, and wacky wonders.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's colon names. Bizarre biology. Yeah. Get rid of the colons and shorten these.
Yeah. No colons.
Wild,
4 words.
Weird, wacky science. Freaky facts. Strange science. Mind-bending molecular mischief. Perverse physics oddities.
So far, that's my favorite.
Delightful quantum quirks. Quirks and quarks?
Quirks, yeah, well, that's a good idea. We'll call it quirks and quarks. That's perfect.
What about oddities of science? Because we're odd.
Oddities is nice. I like oddities.
Peculiar. I can't say that. I've never been able to say that word. Peculiar? Peculiar?
Peculiar.
Peculiar?
Yeah, that's it.
Peculiar.
That's it.
Like Lee-er.
Peculiar.
Freaky science mysteries. Mind-blowing weird science. Strange experiments. Unusual facts. Can you come up with 10 more that are stranger?
Yeah, that's it.
Of course, here are 10 more. Alien antics and odd occurrences. Bizarre biomes and freaky flora. Eccentric elements, crazy compounds, ludicrous.
Centric elements. What's that? Centric elements? Is
eccentric.
That what eccentric elements. Eccentric elements.
So your favorite one is, I like oddities of science.
Oddities. Yeah.
This didn't go as well as I thought, which is always what happens with AI.
That's what happens with ChatGPT. And I think what we've done here has been very informative and has spoken to the real nature of this, is that it's a lot of hype and then it's mediocre. And that's really, I mean, everybody said, it's going to be better than humans at everything, but it's not really. Like pretty much everything, a human, maybe not as fast as ChatGPT, but humans are still better at all the things. If you take the best human against the best ChatGPT, I think. I can't think of an exception to that rule. Can you?
No. First of all, I appreciate that you tied that all together to make it educational. Like you took a terrible 10-minute interview, and at the end you came up with a moral, you came up with a purpose, you came up with an angle.
I think it's more about the journey. I think we had fun with it, and it made us get along, and we had like a nice time, and that's really what that's what we're supposed to do with it, is play with it. I think it was perfect. The fact that it didn't do a better job than a human would, I think is good. It's honest.
I'm just saying you tied together what we just did in 10 minutes. You summarized it in such an effective way. That's why you're an amazing science educator, communicator, whatever.
I think of myself as an oddity, really.
Space oddity.
Science oddity.
Yeah, weird.
You
Oddity. The oddity odyssey?
Ooh, now you... Oh, yeah, wait. It's space oddity. No, wait. Odyssey. Where's the word Odyssey? Odysseus. Oddity.
Then when we come back, we're going to talk about zodiac signs, studying whether they have any impact on your personality, your psychology, your life. People throw these assertions around that astrology is a real thing. I mean, it is a real thing because it's a thing that exists, but the predicting power of astrology. Some schmucks studied it, and we're going to go over the results when we get back.
Oddity, oddada. Life goes on.
Oddity, oddada, life goes... I don't know that song. We're here with science educator, communicator, Dan Riskin. We are here with science communicator, educator, media personality, and generally rather handsome individual, Daniel K. Riskin. Dan, welcome back.
Thanks for that. Thanks for those nice things you said about me. I think you're handsome too.
Oh boy. You know, I was really, really busy yesterday.
Were you? Tell me about it.
I don't mean to brag, but there was this paper about something called stress bragging, and I know that it's in your list of stories to talk about this week with other people. Have you talked about it yet?
I have talked about it with a couple people, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I've also talked about it, and I don't mean to brag, but I was really busy interviewing the person who's named first in that list of people who wrote the paper.
Right. Oh, okay.
Jessica Rodell. Yeah, that's right. I'm bragging. You just talked about it. I talked to the people. Yes.
Wow, you took this next level. So it's a paper about how when you brag about things, people don't like you. And
people know that because they listened to my show yesterday.
And you interviewed the person who wrote the paper, and you're bragging to me that you did that. That's great. I applaud you.
I was too busy doing that to talk to you, I guess, yesterday.
Listen, I know that you work very hard to make good comedy, and I know you work very hard to make clever comedy, but this is one of the greatest pieces of radio that I've ever been a part of. You, sir, I take my hat off to you because I thought maybe I didn't see that coming. I'm so impressed. How do you do it?
What's the politics around where people's names are when a study's published? Because I noticed it's not alphabetical.
No, if everybody did the same stuff, then alphabetical is the sort of democratic way to do it, which is great if your last name is Adams. But usually the first author is the person who actually wrote the paper, who probably did the experiment and wrote the paper. Often it's a grad student or something like that. The last author is the person who got the funding to pay for the study, who is usually the boss of the first author. So the senior author is usually the last author, and they're sort of like, this, look at this, it happened in my lab. And the first author is the person who did all the hard work. So when you're a grad student, you want to be first author as much as possible. And then when you're the fancy professor, you want to be last author. And it makes you look really good if you have lots of grad students as first author. And you'll often see a resume or a CV of an academic. If they're a professor, they'll highlight the first authors that are students because it shows that they have a functional lab where students are able to publish first author papers. That's a mark of a good lab.
Well, I interviewed the first author of I'm So Stressed, The Relational Consequences of Stress Bragging in Personnel Psychology, I guess is the journal.
Yeah, that's cool. How'd the interview go? Was it good?
Great. She was great. And she emailed my producer afterward to say she had so much fun talking to me.
I bet you had fun talking to you. I have talked about science to normal hosts, and they're boring as anything. Like normal science shows, are the worst. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons it's so hard to come up with a good name for a science segment is because they all sound like they're going to be a science show, and everybody knows science shows are the worst. Like there's so many of them are so boring. Oh, so why did you do that? Well, we believe, it's just so it's so out of the, like, it's so, there's just a formula and everybody does it. So what have you found out? Oh, well, was it hard to get your monkeys to do that? Blah, 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 blah. Like, it's kind of boring, and you don't follow that formula. So I'm not surprised she enjoyed that.
I just came up
what
with
was the highlight? Did it give you new, like, did you realize that bragging actually is a bad idea and you will never do it again until you talk to me on the next show?
Well, one takeaway is that if you are vulnerable, this is anecdotal. I don't think they covered this in the paper, but they do want to research it more. But anecdotally, or at least they're starting to study it now, it would appear that if you act very vulnerable, then people will when you're acting really stressed, you're really asking for people to cut you some slack, whether it's helping you. If you in the workplace are always telling people you're so busy, you're so swamped, you're so busy, you're kind of asking for sympathy for stuff being late. You might be asking for help, like get some of my work done for me. And most people, the response to that is no, they don't like you. They think you're incompetent. Yes. But so you're kind of wanting one thing and you're getting the opposite results. She suggests being vulnerable. So breaking down and crying when people ask if you're able to get work done, I think is a great way to do it.
Is that her words or yours?
No, but I said if you break down and cry in your manager's office, or when your coworkers say you need to get this done, would that be a way to be vulnerable? And she said yes, anecdotally. So,
anecdotally.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, I was impressed. I mean, I've only read the paper. She's the expert on it. But I did like that point that came out, that it's not the fact that people are stressed that makes them seem incompetent. It's the fact that they're bragging about it that makes them seem incompetent. Because when they look at people who are clearly stressed, but they are not bragging about it, it does not cause the same kinds of conflict and hatred as it does if the person's bragging about how stressed they are. And so really, and I would, what I sort of perceive here is like everybody knows that you shouldn't be a braggy person. Like braggy people are socially like nobody likes a bragger. And this was just like, let's see if we can show that scientifically. And they did.
Cool. Let's talk about the thing that I teased 5 minutes ago. Dan Riskin, science educator. I have a new name for our segment. It's called A Science Segment That Isn't the Worst with Dan Riskin. Do you like it?
I do like it. I do like it.
It's not really making any claims about the quality of the segment, except for that it's just not the worst.
It's not the worst. I feel confident that it's not the worst.
Of all the times people spoke into microphones about the science, the science, Dan.
These science. Even with that happening, it's still not the worst.
Yeah, there's one worse than this. I'd like to identify
at least one. There's one or more that are worse than this, but not zero.
Zodiac signs. I mean, I feel like in the last 10 years, astrology has become more popular even. And people make claims like if men, it's basically like the stock market for women. The stock market isn't real and neither is astrology, but men believe in the stock market, so give women astrology. I kind of get that, you know what I'm saying? Like if you want to date, you just have to humor people. So when people start talking about astrology now, I don't get in their face about it. I just smile and say I'm a Gemini. And if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. But what's curious to me about astrology compared to other claims, like let's take this claim. There's a cosmic benevolent force that everyone is connected to, and everyone has fate and destiny, and the cosmic force intertwines us all, and it's supernatural in nature. Like,
I've seen Star Wars. Go on.
That's not really a testable claim. Like,
right.
If you're claiming there's some supernatural thing that you can't really test whether it's there or not because it's somehow bigger than us or in a higher dimension than us, I'm not going to believe it, but it's not a testable claim. Astrology, however, makes testable claims.
Yes,
it says,
sure does.
This person with this sign is going to act this way, or these two kinds of people with these two different signs are going to get along or not get along. These are testable claims that have been tested before, but there's a new paper. Is that it? Is it a paper? Yes, a survey.
Yeah, it's a new paper.
Survey paper.
No, it's a new paper. They've published the paper based on it's not even a survey about astrology. What they did is they took some data from the States where they had personality data for a whole bunch of people, and like I forget what the sample size is. I think it's 12,791. That's what it is. 12,000 Americans have filled out this personality survey where they've answered a whole bunch of questions about like about depressive symptoms, psychological distress, work dissatisfaction, financial dissatisfaction, whether they think their life is dull, how healthy they think they are, how unhappy they are in their marriage, all these different things. And when they filled that out, they also put their birth date on it. And so what this guy did is he went and took all those answers and he figured out what their astrological signs were from their birth dates. They were never asked about their astrological sign in the survey, which is a really important part of the puzzle.
Because it can bias people.
It would bias you if you remind somebody of what their astrological sign is and they have a knowledge of what that astrological sign is supposed to do. And I don't know any of that stuff. So like, I'm a Cancer. Let's say Cancers are supposed to always, emphasize things. Maybe that's a thing that Cancers do. I have no idea. But if that were the case and you said, okay, Dan, you're a Cancer, let me ask you how bats fly, then I would probably be predisposed to emphasize certain things when I'm talking, right? And so anyway, for this, the people who answered all the questions they were not thinking about astrology at all. And when you look at their answers, there is no significant difference among them. And just to really prove the point, this guy made up different astrological signs with a random number generator and randomly assigned them to all those same 12,000 people and looked to see the patterns, and they looked identical to the real astrological signs. That is to say, there was no significance. They're just random.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we already knew this, but I get that astrology is fun for people. So I try not to rain on the parade.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Some people really believe that stuff, and it is a parade. You don't want to, the question is, why rain on the parade? Is it important to you that everybody sees the world you do? Is it the same way you do? Is it important to you that everybody sees the world in a scientific way? Because if it is, maybe astrology is not the best place to start. Maybe we should do something with higher stakes like climate change.
Yeah. But a society that tolerates accepting beliefs without any evidence that actually are testable, like climate change, it's benign, but that mechanism that causes people to believe those kinds of things can be reapplied to horrible things. And that's my fear. To draw a parallel to religion, I'm sure even if you, listener, are a religious person, you don't believe in all these other religions. But these other religions don't make testable claims. Well, some do, but a lot don't. Like, that's the whole idea of taking things on faith. But you don't have to take astrology on faith, because you can test it, and people do. I feel like when these studies happen, it's kind of a meta-study on the scientific method. Like, we actually can use the scientific method to debunk pseudoscience.
Yeah.
It's sort of a test of the process.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And it works.
Yeah.
And the process where it came out, it showed that it wasn't real. I mean, you expect if you have, anyway, yeah. It's, what I like about it is that it gives you a litmus test. So if you're somebody that considers yourself somebody that believes in scientific facts, and you also are somebody that believes in astrology, you contain multitudes. And I don't know how you work that out. For me, that's why I can't do astrology.
That's ridiculous that you don't know how people work that out. We all live with cognitive dissonance in our mind. We all have views, emotions, feelings. We may like somebody that has done bad things. Do you have any comedians that you like who are problematic? We all, and you don't agree with, I don't mind Dave Chappelle that much, but I think what he says about trans people is awful. I hold it both in my head at the same time. I think it's uniquely human. Or maybe the animals do it too, to hold two opposing views in your head at the same time that are in conflict with each other. I know how we do it because I don't know, I get on planes and I know that the exhaust from the plane is destroying the planet. You know? So that's how they do it, Dan. I challenge you.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you figured it out. But for me, I don't know. I always just try to be the Spock in the situation and not the Captain Kirk.
Look. We're all hypocrites, and those who think we're not are the biggest hypocrites of them all. So maybe that's you, Dan.
I guess I've really learned that I'm the one to blame. I found a paper that poo-poos on Zodiac signs, and suddenly I'm the one who caused climate change. And fair enough. I think I am.
We're here with Dan Riskin, the sole person responsible for climate change.
You're welcome, everybody. You're welcome.
We'll be back with him in a moment. We're here with Dan Riskin, and we're actually going to do some science, or at least talk about some science, because this stuff's cool, and it involves AI, which we mentioned earlier, but now it's AI headphones that are super creepy, something out of a spycraft movie, but the technology, I think, is real.
University of Washington out near Seattle, they have been taking existing technology like noise canceling headphones and trying to improve on what it does, and using AI for the AI to recognize the difference between different noises. So back in late 2023, their big finding was, or their big sort of breakthrough was, you could make the headphones listen for certain noises and block other kinds of noises out. So I'm vacuuming and I'm waiting for somebody to deliver a package to my door. So I want the vacuum cleaner to not make it to my ears, but if the doorbell rings or there's someone who knocks lightly at the door, I want to hear that. And if the baby starts crying in the other room, I definitely want to hear that. So I'm vacuuming and I've got my noise canceling headphones, and using AI, it can figure out the difference between those sounds and it can know what to listen for. And I thought that was pretty cool. I wasn't that excited about it, but then when I thought about it, I realized actually it could be quite useful. But this latest breakthrough that they have is, like you said, it's very cool. It's this idea that when you're in a crowded place, it can be hard to focus on the person who's talking to you because the people all around you are also very loud and annoying, right? And so wouldn't it be nice if you could just isolate one voice? And so the way these headphones work that they've got them working is they push a button on existing headphones. They just have a little button on it. And while you are facing the person and they are talking, the AI breaks down all the different sounds and figures out who the different voices are, and then figures out which one you must want to listen to because it's the one that is reaching both headphones at about the same time. It's listening to the sounds, it's comparing left and right ear, and if they get there at the same time, that means your head is pointing towards that person, and that's probably the person you want to listen to. And then once it's isolated that one voice, it can then make everybody go quiet except for that one person and make them loud, and then you don't have to face them anymore. You can walk next to them, and it's picked them out digitally in terms of like what their voice is compared to everybody else's, and you will be able to hear them without having to fight the crowd on the noise.
It's kind of a fantastic, dare I say, novel joining or novel smashing together of optical recognition AI, which is AI that looks at a picture or a video and starts to identify what the various components of that video are. Think of, I don't know, driverless driving. Is that what you call it? Driverless cars?
Yeah, driverless driving cars, yeah.
Driverless driving cars that drive without drivers.
Yes. Yeah.
Or, I don't know, anything like at an airport, security AI that wants to see how many people are in line. It identifies these kinds of things. And then sound filtering AI. And it sort of smashes them together and it says, hey, you're looking at a person. I see their mouth moving. Maybe I got to figure out that's who the speaker is using the optical recognition. And then it does the audio filtering AI.
Yeah, but this is all audio. So this doesn't use actually any camera at all. And that's why it's exciting. It can use existing technology. It's using it from it's the same way a bat figures out the direction to something. So when bats are trying to figure out which direction a sound comes from, which is usually the echo of their own voice, and they're trying to like zone in on a mosquito or whatever, they pay attention to when the sound reaches the left ear or the right ear. And from that, they can figure out if it's slightly to the left, slightly to the right, or straight ahead of them. But to figure out if it's up or down is a lot harder because it reaches both ears. Like say something straight in front of you, but it's up high above the horizon or down low below the horizon or right at the horizon. Those are going to hit your ears at the same time. But they have this little flap of skin on the inside of the ear called a tragus. And you know that little like nub?
You've mentioned traguses. How do I know? I know that word, and the only way I possibly know that word. Look, can I stop you about the bats? Because you're going off on a tangent here.
It's okay. All right.
How often a week do you do this? And let me say what you just did, because I don't think you realized you did it, or maybe you did. When someone who's interviewing you is an idiot and didn't read the paper, for example, I just displayed that when I said it was a novel joining of optical recognition and, I don't know, audio filtering, whatever AI, which is clearly not what the technology is. I screwed it up. You yes-anded me. You yes-and not really'd me. How often? I feel like I've heard you do this when other people are interviewing you. When they say something really stupid that really shows that they have no understanding of the material, you yes and not really them, which I love. You like kind of validate them. You're like, yeah, that's a really great. But here's how it actually works. But really, what you should say is, no, you idiot.
My favorite. So listen, I'm on the receiving end of that often, and when people do it to me, I really appreciate it. The place where that happens to me the most is when I go birding with people who know birds, because I like birds.
They do yes and not really. They're like, yes, those sounds you identified are really interesting, and they're characteristic of the bird you're talking about. But but those aren't the sounds, and that's not the bird.
Yeah, right. No, I was out with my friend, this guy Jody Allaire, and he is one of the best birders in Canada. He's this legend, and I throw his name around whenever I meet birders. I'm always like, oh yeah. Well, one time when I was here with Jody Allaire, and then they're like, ooh, like it's like, oh yeah, that when I warm up with Wayne Gretzky before a game, that kind of a thing. And so Jody Allaire, I was out with him, and I'm terrible, right? And I'm like, oh, I think I hear something, and he's like, yep. Well, you know what? I don't think I've ever heard a robin in this place. Like it was a robin. It was like the most basic bird that anybody should be able to identify ever. And there we are in like some woods, and I hear a robin, and I'm like, oh, there's an interesting bird. And he's like, yes, but I've never heard one right here before. Like he found a way to make it into a good observation and worthy. And I just was like, I know what you did there, and I really appreciate it, because you could have been like, Dan, I've gone birding with a lot of people who are pretty dumb, and this might be one of the dumbest things anybody's ever said while birding. So he didn't do that, and as a result, I still like birds, because I think the danger is if he poops on me that I hate all of it and I give up. And he wants to get everybody birding. He works really hard to make that happen.
And that's your angle as a science communicator. But if I had a wider reach that wasn't just, I don't know, my mother, I feel like I could coin the phrase yes and not really, because that's what it is. It's the yes and not really.
I don't feel like it's a not really. It's a yes and, because you're right. It is a marriage of the way, like it's the approach to problems that is taken by visual AI, of looking at a whole bunch of different people in line up and counting them and identifying what's in the picture. It's got to be, I mean, I'm sure that the sensory input is different, but maybe the algorithms are exactly the same. And so in the sense, it could be a mashup of exactly the same mathematics. You isolate what the different voices are, and then you can start to track them as they move around in the image. Then you isolate what the different voices are and you track around and move them around in the sound file. It's the same thing. So I really believe that you were onto something. And the fact that it just doesn't happen to have eyeballs doesn't really negate the point you were making. I thought there was a lot of truth to it.
Yes and not really.
Yeah, not really, but yeah.
Yeah, and it keeps the person you're talking to enthused. You know, when you immediately say, you didn't really understand what I'm talking about, let me restate that, you idiot.
And you can't hold anchors to that standard, right? I mean, like if I'm on the TV, like I've seen this happen a lot where I'm talking to somebody and then like this happens on CP24 where I'll be talking to somebody and then I'll explain something and then they'll say, can you explain this? And I'll be like, I just did. But I don't say that. I explain something related and just continue talking. And I find out later that they've got somebody in their ear saying, hey, there's going to be a press conference. The prime minister might be showing up on TV in a second, but we're not sure if we're going to go to that or commercial. So, and he's looking at me and nodding, but he's doing multiple things at the moment, right? And so, you know, anchors have a lot of stuff. And plus, a lot of times they don't have time to really read the whole, like the gist of what I'm about to talk about. And so, you know, it's on me to explain it no matter where they're coming from.
That's one thing that I haven't. That's a skill I don't have. When I've been on live radio and a board op talks into my ear, like to tell me something, and someone's like I'm interviewing someone, or I'm on the phone with someone, or I'm just monologuing and I'm taking a brief pause, or like playing a little bit of music between stories that I'm doing, and they come in my ear. Not only can I not understand it, my immediate response is anger.
Yeah, me too. I can't do that either. It's so infuriating because like. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. But I have had, the one time it really worked was I was doing a live TV hit with Daily Planet back when I was kind of new at this and I was learning these skills. And it's funny because when I was on Daily Planet, doing these live appearances was like this tiny part of my week. It was 5 minutes every Thursday. But it turned into the thing that I now do all the time. And I really loved it. But I remember once I was talking and I was explaining something and then the director who was shooting me in my ear all of a sudden said, we haven't isolated of what you're talking about. Like we can show that. And I was like, oh, cool. So, and then I just started describing the thing and then he cut off of me and he started showing the thing that I was talking about. So it looked really, really smooth. And I was like, oh, I can see how this, if you knew what you were doing at this could be a lot of fun where you can like throw to an image and stuff like that. Like if you and the director are like completely on the same page. So, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I can't do it. I don't know. And because the only real radio job I ever had didn't matter because it was 17 million o'clock at night. I would just get mad at my board. I would get mad at my board up on the air. So what he was trying to do is like make the show more smooth, and then I would interrupt everything to be like, "What did you just say?
Why are you talking to
me?" Oh man, I miss getting into fights with my board up. Tony Tedesco. I mean, he would be okay with me saying we used to bicker. What a guy.
Yeah, he gets bickered. He takes it and he gives it. He's
That's one great quality I appreciate in people. If you can dish it, you got to be able to take it.
Oh, yeah.
If someone can't take it, but they never dish it, like leave them alone. Yeah. Don't yell at them. Don't get into a petty squabble with someone who can't take it, but never dishes it, you know?
But if they dish it,
then you got to be able to. If someone like is so rude, not that Tony's so rude, but if someone is so rude and then when you're rude back, they just get so offended, you know, that's the worst. That's the worst.
Yeah, we all know those people. It's almost as bad as bragging about how busy you are.
Which is something that I did with the author of a study that researched about bragging into how busy you are, Jessica Rodell, here on the show yesterday. I forget what the name of the episode was. I might have just called it busy bragging, now that I think about it.
Yeah. I think, they call it busy bragging. But anyway, that's cool. It's rad.
Or you can try to find media appearances with Dan Riskin from last week stored in podcast form. Maybe Jim Richards is his show. Maybe someone else. You can hear Dan talk about that topic. Or you can hear the author of the study
No, you want to go straight for the source. I don't want to humble brag, but no, I guess I'm not even humble bragging. I'm gonna look up the interview. You know I'm gonna do it because I have your podcast. I listen to it all the time, so I'm gonna pull that one up.
Yeah, you wait for the episodes with you in it, and then you zoom right to your appearance, and that's all you listen to because you're a narcissist like me. Yeah. Dan, what a pleasure.
Pleasure's mine.
Daniel K. Riskin is a science educator based out of Toronto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And this is a science segment that isn't the worst. Now we'll take things in a serious direction with regards to a Canadian Supreme Court ruling that was kind of a nightmare for sex workers' rights and kind of a nightmare for human rights. So up next, someone to walk us through that from the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform. Well, the Supreme Court of Canada has rejected sex workers' rights organizations to intervene and participate in an important court case concerning the constitutionality of sex work laws based on the Workers' Charter rights. I have someone here to discuss that. She is the national coordinator for the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform, Jenn Clamen. Jenn, thanks for discussing this with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about what this case is and why it's significant for sex workers across Canada?
Sure. Just to clarify, groups around the country who intervened to speak to be able to also speak to the case in the court at the Supreme Court of Canada. Many of us were rejected. And so an intervener is someone who has a special take on the case, who gets a legal right to speak to the issues, the legal issues that are at hand. And our alliance is an alliance of 23 sex worker rights groups that are led by sex workers. And are sex workers. And the Klubikoff case is a case of two men who were charged with two of the prostitution laws in Canada. They were charged for earning a material benefit and procuring. And all of the legal arguments that they're bringing forward aren't about their own rights as third parties, but the legal arguments for their case that they're making as to why they should not have been charged are arguments based on sex workers' charter rights and how the laws are dangerous for sex workers. And that's why those laws shouldn't exist. And ergo, that's why they shouldn't have been charged. So our alliance was rejected as an intervener in that case. And that is both infuriating and ridiculous to us because the case is about the rights of sex workers and about sex workers, how the laws impact on sex workers. And the whole litigation is based on that. So to not hear from the very people whose charter rights are being litigated is outrageous.
So what would be the impact of this exclusion? What could happen in this case if you were allowed to participate, and what will happen now that you're not?
That's a good question. So without the direct experience of sex workers of these particular, just the two laws that the men are being charged with, there lacks the evidence in the case itself, but there lacks the perspective of how it impacts on sex workers. And the discussions remain not wholly theoretical, but difficult to place, I would say. Like, it's difficult to recognize what the impacts of sex workers are when sex workers are absent. And it really allows other people, continues the tradition, both in the courts and in other institutions and in society in general, of where people are speaking for sex workers. And I would say that's the most damaging piece of this. And actually, what the most damaging piece of it would be the future of litigation, and what kind of precedent does this set for marginalized groups who need to have their voices represented in court. And if we can't have our voices represented in court and the realities that we experience, what does that mean for charter litigation? What does it mean to fight for people's rights if those people are never present? I think that is a very damning reality that we all have to now contend with.
I would agree with you. Now, what kind of reform are you looking for sex workers? I mean, these people are forced by the criminal justice system, by laws, to kind of live on the fringe and take risks, and makes their careers more difficult. What laws would you like to see reformed, and what outcome would you have liked to have seen from this case?
Well, this case, again, is only challenging two of the laws, and so it will go to the Supreme Court probably sometime in September or October. What we hope for is that the Supreme Court of Canada will determine that those two laws that are being challenged in the Klubikoff case are unconstitutional, meaning that they should be struck from the criminal code. Our alliance launched our own constitutional challenge in 2021 that challenges all of the criminal code provisions against sex work in what is known as the PCEPA, the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. And we would hope for all of those laws to be struck down. But this case, Klubikoff is only challenging 2 of those laws. So we do hope that the Supreme Court of Canada recognizes the unconstitutionality of those laws and that we can continue with our own, with our own constitutional challenge when this case is finished, and that we can challenge the rest of the provisions. So what that means for us is we do want to see a policy environment where there are no criminal laws regulating sex work, and where regulation is designed by sex workers, but is more industry specific. So where occupational health and safety laws can be accessed, where employment laws, youth protection, public health, these sorts of regulations, not the Criminal Code of Canada. We do think that sex workers need access to good working conditions, and we do think other issues around poverty and homelessness and housing and education need to be addressed. But as long as there are criminal provisions against sex workers and against sex work, then sex workers, as you acknowledged, puts all sex workers, the laws put sex workers in all danger, and sex workers are forced to live and work in dangerous conditions. So that's that's the policy context that we're hoping for, is that the criminal laws no longer exist around sex work.
So you're talking about terrible working conditions. What are the state of working conditions now for sex workers? And do you have any personal stories or stories from workers that have spoken to you with some of the real life impacts that these laws are having on people?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about working conditions in a context of criminality, we need to think really broadly. So when you can't, it's not so much as you go into work and there aren't the materials you need to be able to do your work, or you can't access safety exits, or you can't produce the things you need to work safely. That's a basic, and that's obviously happening in massage parlors where you're not allowed to have condoms on the premises because they are evidence of sex work. Where in strip clubs, sex workers aren't necessarily considered employees and end up working overtime, or can get fired for discriminatory reasons, or not hired for discriminatory reasons. All of these things are examples of working conditions that people who work in straight jobs would recognize. But the unrecognizable things that exist in the sex industry are, you quite literally can't be communicating and speaking about the prices that you charge, the services that you offer, what your limits are, what consent does or doesn't look to you, because the act of communicating or advertising or selling sex is actually illegal in Canada. And so everything that you do to sell sex, and the selling of the sex itself, is actually illegal. The purchasing of the sex is illegal. The advertising of the sexual services is illegal. The working with other people is illegal. Every context in which you're doing it is illegal. And so that creates an environment where sex workers are at all moments trying to avoid police detection. And that just means you're hiding and you're not being open about what you do. And that's even more exacerbated for communities that are already surveilled or over surveilled by police. And so for Black communities and Indigenous communities and migrant communities who have even more reason to not draw the attention of the police, people are hiding. And that environment of clandestinité, I don't know how you say that in English, but that environment of hiding actually creates a really stressful and fearful environment for everybody. And it really attracts and invites perpetrators who know that sex workers can't readily go to police. So it's almost an invitation for exploitation by third parties and by perpetrators. So those, when we speak about working conditions, it's obviously working conditions that would be recognized under occupational codes, but in a context where sex work is illegal, everything is criminalized. And so the criminalization itself is what creates the exploitative conditions of work.
And you can't speak up when you're the victim of exploitative workplace practices, when you're the victim of a crime. You might be scared to go to the police. That's what's really horrible about this.
Yeah, you're also considered a criminal. So there's that's exactly what's horrible about this. And there's a provision in the criminal code in Canada that makes sex workers immune from selling their own sexual services or advertising their own sexual services, but it still remains illegal. You wouldn't need an immunity in the law if the act itself wasn't illegal. And so sex workers organize their work according to that illegality and take risks according to that illegality in their lives. And that's what's actually really important. It's not so much about arrest of sex workers. It's about the other things that you can't do. You can't actually maintain an indoor location, a working environment that the Supreme Court of Canada deemed to be very important in the last constitutional challenge in Bedford, because working from an apartment is actually illegal. You can't have people on the premises to ensure your safety because that's illegal. You actually can't do any of these things because they're illegal. So there's impacts on your family, there's impacts on you, there's impacts on your capacity for economic empowerment. And of course, there's impacts on whether or not you report crimes of violence against you. So we really hope that this Klubikov case is the first step in dismantling this criminal regime.
So you're the national coordinator for the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform. Where can people find out more about your group and perhaps donate to the cause, give support to the cause?
Thank you. They can go to www.sexworklawreform.com is our website. You could read all the fantastic work that our member groups do together for this law reform initiative. And sex workers across the country really need that support.
Jenn Clamen, appreciate you speaking with me and going over this with me.
Thanks for having us. It's really appreciated.
Okay, it's time to get definitely very serious, definitely, with our senior foreign correspondent of politics in Washington, D.C., and I don't know why I said foreign, except for the fact that he's very foreign. This man is going to walk us through the recent ruling out of New York where Trump was found guilty of 34 counts of, well, he's going to walk us through it. Tony 5 in a moment. Well, former U.S. President Donald J. Trump was convicted of 34 counts of something. I think a lot of people don't understand the charges exactly. Hush money, fraudulent payments, falsification of business records in the first degree, all that fun stuff. But I know that it has something to do with porn star Stormy Daniels, his former attorney, Michael Cohen. But I have someone special here to walk us through this breaking news. We have our senior Washington political correspondent, Tony 5, to comment and walk us through what has gone on with this court case. Tony, welcome.
David, it's a sad day for the population at the moment. Apparently, Bill Clinton is going to be re-elected once more.
No, that's not what happened here in New York. But you know that. You're just clearly joking because you're a well-qualified, well-credentialed senior political correspondent.
When you said it was something to do with Bush, I always thought you were talking about porno films.
I wasn't mentioning Bush. I was talking about Trump, Thelonious Trump, which is my nickname for him now. It's like Thelonious Monk, you know, the jazz pianist.
Monk.
Yeah. No?
Racist. Carry on.
But yeah.
So you were saying, so what's happened? Yeah, so he actually got prosecuted. Yeah, he's been 34 counts indicted against him. Now, do you think he will see jail time, David?
Do you think he can count to 34?
No. But do you think he'll see jail time? What's your thoughts, David?
Well, of course.
I think in July we find out, right?
Yeah, July will be the sentencing. I have heard, and I'm by all accounts an idiot, and you'll correct me because you're a senior political correspondent.
Correct, I can spell correspondent, David, 2 R's.
Well, isn't there a third one at the end? No, that's a different word.
That's a completely different word. That's a word you're thinking of with 3 R's in it.
Got it. Reduce, recycle, reuse? Recycle, reduce, reuse?
Isn't that a political statement? Reuse, recycle, abuse.
At what point did recycling become a political?
I don't know. At what time did abuse become political?
Okay, so
I mean,
34
that's something
counts.
to think about.
I understand. So it's like falsifying business records. People say it's for the hush money, but it's how the hush money was paid and hidden and issued through a lawyer. Right.
That Leonard Cohen, innit?
No, it's Michael Cohen.
Right.
Similar. I mean, one's
did he used to be Trump's friend?
Yeah.
And then they fell out, and then Trump made a whole point about him being this ruthless and liar and whatever. But he was the one who apparently paid the hush money to Paul Daniels.
Yeah, Paul Daniels.
Yeah.
Stormy Daniels. Okay,
carry on.
She fits all my criteria for Patriot, Stormy Daniels. If you are willing to sacrifice your personal, your public life to serve your country and for what you think is right, then I think that qualifies a patriot. I know you're going to make a joke, but Monica Lewinsky had her whole reputation tarnished.
Yes.
And she now stands up for like women's rights and stuff. And her life has been ruined by something out of her control. And she got up and stood up for what she believed in. That's my view of a patriot. Stormy Daniels fits that criteria. But
so Stormy Daniels, Monica Lewinsky, all people that in all essence of the word have had semen put on them.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Really sad way to stand up for political beliefs, David.
It's bigger.
I'm not going to do it.
Well, you were the semen's alive. Anyway,
I was. So yeah.
Back
so
on track.
basically, but Monica Lewinsky, she's the real advocate for women's rights now. So she's kind of rescued it back.
I mean, she was like young. He was in a position
super
of
young.
power over her. You know, like the president basically cornered her and got her alone and then took advantage of her. You know, like how can you even consent when you're that young and it's the president coming at you? And yet her reputation was ruined and not Bill Clinton's. And she stands up to try to protect those who are victims. And to
Which
me,
is pretty decent, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
How old was she? Was she late teens, early 20s, right?
no, she wasn't a teenager, but she was young. Yeah, she was very young. She was only born in 1973.
Oh my God, so she's only a couple of years older than me. Okay.
So 95 is when it started, and she was born in 1973, so she would have been 22.
Yeah, so very young. I was nearly right. I was 3 years off. And how old is Stormy Daniels? She's about 62 now, right?
Yeah, and I don't know how old she is, but also Monica Lewinsky speaks out against cyberbullying because she was one of the first kind of like media bully on the internet. She was the butt end of every joke, and yet she didn't do anything wrong.
Mm.
You know, she got thrown under the bus. What did she do?
No, I mean, to be fair, did she have the oral of the sex?
I believe so, yeah.
Right, and she kept the dress that he climaxed on.
Yeah, and then I saw that woman. What was her name? God, it was such
Hillary.
No, Paula Jones. Oh my God, it was a whole thing. Linda Tripp was the one who.
Was she the prosecutor?
No, she was the woman who started recording her conversations to like set up. Forget it. Back to the Trump indictment.
Okay, let's talk about Trump. We're well off target now. So do you think he'll go to prison? That's the question.
Well, as I was saying, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I know, being an idiot, and you're the senior Washington political correspondent, so maybe you'll correct me. First-time offenders for nonviolent, business, financial crimes like this, or falsifying government records, forgery, whatever it is, they typically don't see jail time. But the crimes are substantial. Like they're serious crimes, and so they do typically receive punishment, whether it's fines or house arrest or strict probation. So there's likely, I mean, if he wasn't Trump, he would likely be seeing a pretty steep punishment. Now, not jail time, but jail time is an option, but there is no minimum, and typically, unless you're a constant forger who's been arrested 15 times and it's your 10th conviction, and then maybe they'll throw you in jail. But so I don't think he'll see jail time. But what does house arrest, what does probation mean to a former president? That's what I ask you, Tony.
I find it completely surreal that somebody who is in the running to be the president of your great country and my great weird country, that can possibly be in a court and have been really convicted of a crime, and he will still be in the running. Is there nothing in the Constitution to say, let's just replace him with a stuffed toy or something?
No, it's wild. I think this is what Trump has done for us. He's moved the reality bar for what people are willing to accept and what they're willing to live in from their leadership so far that now like anything can happen, and the supporters of these people don't care. Whereas 15, 20 years ago, this would have been the end of a politician's career.
Exactly.
Right? Or remember when Mitt Romney, the guy who like everyone hates now, who's a Republican because he speaks out against Trump. Remember when Mitt Romney was the candidate? Like that was the people they were nominating. I wasn't a fan of Mitt Romney politically, but at least he was like not a sociopath with a criminal history.
No. So give me because you live there. What is the overall feeling? I mean, people are still going to vote for him, right? Can this man do nothing to stop people from voting? What does he have to do? What does this guy have to do to stop people from voting for him?
We're talking about a man, Trump, who said, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose any voters. Maybe it's true. Maybe he wasn't just totally delusional and joking. I don't know if there is anything at this point. If not this, then what? But what is curious is the thing that they took down a former president for, and the thing that they can now call a former president a convict for, is like falsifying business records for hush money, for paying off a porn star, like it wasn't for destroying and toppling the government of South American nations. It wasn't for the, Ultra, or what is it? What was the Cuban Con Ultra?
The Contra rebels.
Yeah, the Contra
crisis.
I
mean, we're really good at this, David.
Yeah,
leave this bit in.
I'm taking it out. Contra.
The Brazil Contra.
No, it's fucking
Contraband?
It was the Cuban
missile crisis.
No. I'm gonna get this.
Cuban cigars.
It wasn't for the Contra scandal. It wasn't for like invading Iraq without any actual evidence of weapons of mass destruction and killing tens of thousands of Iraqis, tens of thousands of soldiers. It's not for any of the big stuff, the real stuff. No, it's for this little thing. It's just so bizarre.
Where do you think it will go? Like, how do you think this will carry on? Like, a lot of people I speak to now, they do think he will get voted back in. Like, he can do nothing to stop the lunatic Americans from voting for him. They will just keep, no matter what he does, he can go round to your house, take a massive dump on the middle of your living room, and you'd still vote for him.
Will Trump be voted back in? That is the question we seek to find out with senior Washington political correspondent Tony Five, and we'll be back with him in a moment. We are back with Tony Five, our foreign correspondent, discussing felonious Trump. I love that nickname. I came up with it, but then I looked online and other people had too. But I independently came up with that nickname, Tony.
I do like it, David. It is fantastic.
You had a question for me.
David, I'm curious. How can this happen? What is happening in the world today, David?
How can Trump be convicted of 34 counts of felonious trumping?
Absolutely. What is happening?
I mean, that's the question, right? I don't know. Was it like this when we were younger and we just didn't notice? Were the adults when we were kids saying, how can the world function this way? Like, surely during World War II, you'd read the newspapers, like awful genocides, wars, tens of millions of soldiers dying, and you would say, this is way worse. So clearly it's better now. I mean, there isn't a world war right now. So is it getting worse? I don't know, but... Do you see what I'm saying?
Like it.
Is every generation...
It feels like it's getting worse. Yeah.
It does, but maybe it was always bad.
I don't know. I just feel like the world's gone like to shreds at the moment,
Yeah, but when you leave your house and you talk to your neighbors and you go to the shops and you have a drink with your friends, or you go on vacation and you meet new people, you talk to the weirdo sitting next to you on the plane, does it seem the way that it seems when you turn on the news or read the papers?
Maybe. I find that the more I digest news media and internet and the social media side of it, the more I feel warped and broken. It's like this consistent drip that's just like Chinese water torture. It's so surreal what's happening in the world at the moment. I don't know what I believe anymore.
I understand, but you were too busy on your phone to actually answer my question or pay attention to it. Do you, when you're not watching the news, like when you're talking to people in your community and life, do you feel the way you feel when you think to yourself, how can it possibly get worse? How can it possibly be like this?
Yeah, I'm going to have burger and chips and some ketchup for dinner.
I hate you.
No, do I feel like it's going to get worse?
Put the phone down. Get it out of your hand.
Do I feel like it's going to get worse? Yes, I do.
I didn't ask you that question.
What did you ask me?
Oh my God. Why do I even bother with you?
I love it.
When you speak to the people you know, and when you speak to strangers, and when you travel, and when you go to restaurants and bars.
Yes.
and you just talk to people, do you feel the way you feel when you read the news about Trump? When you see what's happening in the world and you think to yourself, how can it possibly be like this? How can it possibly be worse? Do you feel that way when you actually have human interaction? Can you answer that question? Can you even repeat the question?
Yes, I do. I feel that way. I feel it's very overwhelming. Yeah, I do.
So you talk to your friends and you think, oh, they're all Trump heads and they're all...
Well, I don't... Again, you're talking to me as in the UK. So the view in the UK is it's so warped. Like, yeah, we've got our Boris Johnsons and our Rishi Sunaks and the mass corruption that's happened here with the NHS and this whole sending people to Rwanda thing. Okay, I get it. But Trump's on a different level, dude. It's a caricature. It's a film. It's a really bad Police Academy film.
But I'm asking you, when you were in the United States back in November.
Yes. Yeah.
When you were on boots on the ground, riding the trains, talking to people, talking to my friends, talking to my brother, did you feel this way?
Yeah, I did. I felt still like surprised. And then when I did speak to, because obviously on my journeys, I did meet people who were Trump supporters and stuff. And even when they used to kind of get across to me what they felt and why they believed in Trump, which was, again, the things that they said when he was president, things like moved on a bit. America was a better place for them to live. He felt that he was kind of making America for Americans again. He had his way with for foreign leaders. For example, Putin wouldn't have ever invaded if Trump was still in charge. And their belief is so strong. And I'm not confrontational at all. And I don't want to be confrontational to a lot of these guys, even though I might think they're absolutely off their rockers. I don't know what to say to them half the time. In my community, when I kind of isolate it and shut off the noise, I don't get that overwhelming feeling. And I live here, but maybe I'm just used to it. Maybe I remember moving here from Canada and waking up every day, and San Francisco is bad now. It was pretty bad then. Like, there was a lot of poverty. Yes.
There was people like bleeding on the street downtown, which I never saw in Canada because we have a socialized medicine system.
Yeah.
So like even the deeply impoverished got basic medical treatment. You know, if they had a broken arm with a compound fracture and a bone sticking out, they could get treatment. So you didn't see that on the streets. Whereas in San Francisco, it was so bad. Like, you know, the only way you get treatment is if you show up to the hospital dead pretty much, and then they're obligated to treat you. But if it's like just an open flesh wound, they're just sitting on the street doing meth. Like, I had never seen that in my life. And I remember going to work, walking past it and thinking, how can I possibly live here? But now I'm so used to being in the US that when I would walk past people like that in my 10th year in California, I would just be like, oh, no big deal. Just, you know.
It's like an immunity to it almost. Yeah. You've just become so... Like, I did find... obviously being here in the UK, there's some horrifically bad places, but coming to see you most days on the subway and seeing the poverty and the way people behaved on the subway, and a lot of people just passed out, like literally just unconscious on the subway, and people just walking past them like it was just, and I just kept looking and thinking, is this guy okay, or is this guy, and obviously they're just passed out with drugs or drink.
It's also, it's cold. You were here in November, so like it's a place to sleep. It's a warm place to sleep.
And just the sort of abject kind of, not disinterest, because that's not probably the right word, but lack of concern for the fellow man or woman. I found that really deeply sad. And I know we'd had a conversation about me getting involved with things. Like, don't do that, it's so dangerous. You know, like when people getting conned on the street or people getting into altercations, because obviously, you know, a good percentage of these guys have got knives or guns or whatever. But it's such a world away from what I'm used to. I just find it very, very, very sad.
I mean, there's poverty on the tube. I'm sure you'll find people sleeping on the tube.
But because they move them on. They've stopped it. Like, it sounds really strange, but there's no sort of begging on the underground anymore.
Where do these people go? These people don't just disappear.
They don't, but they push them to elements and areas of the town where you don't see them, where tourists will not see them.
Yeah, but you chose to stay in a part of New York City that is that area. So it's like you came through it. You were so shocked at what you saw, and then I'm saying it happens in London, and you're saying, oh, but it gets pushed away into different areas. But you just happen to stay in that area. So
yeah, I happened to stay in that area of Brooklyn that happened, and that journey I did see some sort of, I didn't stay in like Fifth
not
Avenue
that I don't
whatever.
see people sleeping on the trains, but I'm sure you saw it way more on that long journey to that area of Brooklyn.
Yeah, maybe. And then on the outside of the subways and stuff, the stations, you'd see just like random people just sitting outside, and the cliche, the big metal bins, set on fire and then warming up their hands and stuff.
You saw that?
Again, yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's so Brooklyn. That's like really industrial.
It's really Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
With the gloves with the fingers torn off. Like really Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Like they'd all come out just to do it for me.
Yeah. I was like, why are you staying here? But I guess it was cheap and easy, and you just booked it without
cheap
knowing
and easy,
better.
and I'm cheap and easy. Yeah, so that was it.
Hell yeah, you are. I'm just saying, I don't think it's as bad as the media portrays it. I think it's insane if you actually digest the news. But if you go out and you live your life, that kind of news isn't embodied in the strangers you interact with. That's all I'm saying.
It depends on like who your peer group is, I guess, as well. And
even in Trump country, these people are whole people. They have views that I don't agree with, and I can't even fathom how you get there. But they're whole people. Like, they have family, they have loved ones.
Yeah.
They're like, they have a daughter that they're supportive of, and they're happy the daughter graduates. Like, these aren't just the caricature of the people waving the flags, in downtown New York right now outside the courtroom honking.
Yeah, and they're educated. Some of them are educated.
Sure, some of them aren't. Just like liberals are educated.
Like
some liberals aren't.
Good jobs. And I don't know. I don't know how this will end up. I don't know
when
whether
you meet
this is
these
like
people, you meet the whole person. You're not just meeting who they are at their worst. And so,
just their political side, of course.
But the media is just showing it at its worst. It is bad. I'm not saying it's not bad. I'm just saying you can let it overwhelm you by looking at just what's presented.
Absolutely. And at the same time, I think you've got to kind of sort of step back a bit and maybe not, like for me, I've had to sort of take these breaks away from media, not just like social media, but just, just news media, because it's so overwhelming. There's something happening all the time, and it's just too much to take in,
Too much to take in with Tony 5. That may well be the name of our segment. We're here with Tony. Be back in a moment. And we are back with Tony 5, and I'm going to tell the wonderful tale about my anniversary trip with my girlfriend Miranda. Tony 5, welcome in.
Love is in the air. Love is in the air. David, an anniversary trip with Miranda. Wonderful.
So most people want to go somewhere great, somewhere fantastic, where they will create wonderful memories.
Somewhere romantic, somewhere, maybe a waterbed.
Maybe a waterbed, maybe a...
Free condoms.
Free condoms, all those things.
Lubes coming out of the taps.
That was a long pause.
I know.
Instead of that, we chose to go to the worst place in the world.
Disneyland.
I have never been to Staten Island. It's New York City's forgotten borough.
No way! You went to Staten Island?
Yeah.
What, where all the immigrants came in?
No, that's Ellis Island.
Oh.
Close enough. Staten Island is this little island that's geographically closer, both politically and physically, to New Jersey than it is New York. It's the forgotten borough. There's 5 boroughs: the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. But really, those 4 boroughs are the city. The 5th one, Staten Island, you have to take a ferry to get there. The ferry from Manhattan is free. That's how much they want you to go there. Okay?
What's it called, the ferry?
Staten Island Ferry.
Okay, brilliant. Good name. Well played. Carry on.
So Miranda's like, what do you want to do? We, for whatever reason, cash is tight right now. I didn't want to go on a fancy trip. So I'm like, let's just spend the day in Staten Island. We had never been. Everyone says it's the worst place in New York. I've always said it's the worst place in New York, but it's one thing to repeat people. It's another thing to actually know.
Yeah.
So we go on the ferry and it's packed. And I'm thinking, oh, it can't be that bad, Staten Island.
Yeah. Of course.
And everybody's on the port side of the boat. I don't actually know. Could have been the starboard side. But everyone's on one side of the boat, crowded on the balcony. It's a 3-level ferry. This thing can hold like 10,000 people. It's a big ferry.
Wow.
I don't know,
I'm loving it so far.
Maybe only 2,000, but it's a huge ferry. Maybe less. But it's a big ferry. Could be 1,000. Could be 850 people. Not important. It's a big ferry, 3 levels.
It's a 2-seater, isn't it?
No, it's probably 20 feet across. You know, there's 2 bathrooms on it. It's a whole thing. Maybe there's 3 bathrooms. So as we go by the Statue of Liberty, which I've seen before, everybody's taking photos. Everybody's trying to get that romantic New York tourist Statue of Liberty shot.
Yeah.
And then we get to Staten Island, and there was a huge line to get on the ferry, and nobody's line to get off. I'm like, oh, we can just walk off, even though it's kind of a narrow exit.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 people got off. It's a free ferry. There is a ferry that you pay for that goes a little bit closer. But if you're cheap or you can't afford it, you just get on the free ferry. You get an almost as good Statue of Liberty experience, and then you go back to Manhattan. You don't get off. That's what everyone was doing.
Is that what they were doing?
Yes.
They were just using the commuter thing. Wow.
So we get off, and I don't know, there's like an outlet mall. And to rewind, Miranda's like, okay, if you're going to do this, you got to plan it, because Miranda always plans the trips, but part of the gift is planning the trip. So I go on all these lists online. I go on Reddit. I go on Facebook. I search Google. I go on Yelp. I look at like Zagat. I look at all these like, Travelocity. I go through all these websites to get like a roundup of what do you do on Staten Island that's cool, that's fun, that's a good experience, that's romantic. The top 10 things to do. So I make a list, and I plot them all out on my map, and we start doing these things. And this is the best the internet can come up with.
Hit me.
So
leave.
And
leave Staten Island. Is that number one?
Yes. There was a post on Reddit from someone who'd lived there his whole life, and he was like, here are the things. I'm a local, I know. And so I did maybe 4 of the things on his list. The first thing we did was go to this garden. It was run down. There wasn't that much plants. And there was like this Chinese American garden where they built one of these, I don't know, it's like a temple looking building. A what?
Pagoda.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
A pagoda.
Like a Chinese building.
Yeah, a pagoda.
Yeah, pagoda.
Pagoda, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Well, I gotta look this up. Yes, a pagoda. Yeah.
I know what David, there are sometimes, like a clock tells the time right 3 times a day.
So this pagoda, it was so run down. It was built, I think, during World War I, and there was a plaque outside being like, the Rockefellers built this, like J.P. Morgan donated.
Wow.
Like it was this, I can imagine they had these fancy society parties there 100 years ago, and they just let it go to complete and utter shit. It was run down. It was filled with garbage. Like the koi in the pond looked like they wanted to die so badly. The koi were begging for death.
Oh man!
But it was kind of cool to see this piece that would have been like I imagine like a New York society kind of hangout.
Yeah.
For like
What's
wealthy.
it called? I'm gonna Google it. What's it called?
It's called the
Staten Island Pagoda.
New York Chinese Scholars Garden.
Oh wow!
It was run down, dude.
You have to pay to get in there. It's $4.
I know, it's not worth it. I mean, and then we went to this park, and there was like a band playing, and they were doing karaoke. And they were doing a mix of like, I don't even know, like John Mayer, hippie, white person, folky music and hip hop. And when I got a closer look at the band, it was like a Sandals, Grateful Dead hippie guy with a big beard playing a big guitar, like a flower power dude. And then 3 guys like, who were kind of hip hop looking people. They were black guys. And I was just like, this is amazing. I have never seen a band with hippies and hip hop artists. It was one of the most amazing, like it was really bad music. They were just joking around on the microphone.
But were they so bad it was good?
Yes, and everyone loved it, and they were engaging everyone in the park next to this pagoda thing. I mean, it was terrible, but it was amazing. And then we went for a long walk. We went to a bar. The bar was so bad. It had like pinball machines. If that bar was on my block in Manhattan, I never would have gone. But we had fun, It's Staten Island. And then we went for dinner to this Italian place that was okay, but the owner would not leave us alone. He was like sitting at our table with us the whole time, telling us about his daughter and how he grew up in Manhattan. And it was like, I don't know. And then we walked to this beach, which was filled with garbage, and the water was scummy. Yeah.
Is there a beach in Staten Island?
Oh my God. It was so polluted. It was nice. We walked around. What else did we see? I feel
Did you walk hand in hand?
Yeah, we had a nice romantic day. I'm trying to think. We did one other thing. Oh, we went to like a thrift store, which was good, I guess, but there's better thrift stores here in Manhattan and in Brooklyn.
A thrift store, like a vintage shop?
Yeah, like a vintage shop. Yeah.
Wow.
But it was just, look, my friend could not believe we did this. And he asked, how was it? And I said, 0 stars, would recommend. And that's how I feel
Brilliant.
about it. 0 stars, would recommend.
So you've done all the 5 boroughs now.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done the Bronx, but I've been to the Bronx.
The Bronx sounds scary, but it's not, though, is it?
I mean, there are parts that are scary, but there's parts of Brooklyn and Queens and Manhattan that are scary.
Are they? What's the scary part of Manhattan?
I don't know. Hudson Yards, Alphabet City. There's some projects in
Alphabet. There's a place called Alphabet City. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's where Avenue A, B, and C are in the just east of the East Village.
Okay, didn't know that. All right, okay. I know. I've heard of where's Hell's Kitchen? Because that place sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's like a gayborhood in Hell's Kitchen.
But is it terrifying? Because it sounds terrifying. Hell's Kitchen.
No, it's like a nice area. It's kind of devoid of. It doesn't have a lot of. It's a bit bland, but it's where the gayborhood is. So if you're gay, it's
okay.
I have a couple gay friends who live there. They don't particularly like the neighborhood, but there's a little community out there, so they all hang out, and that's where they live.
Why do they call it Hell's Kitchen?
I don't know. I should know that.
It's a weird name, right? Like I know it, but why Hell's Kitchen? Is it like where the devil cooks? Is it like I don't know.
I don't know, man. There's a reason for it.
You should know. Google, why is it called Hell's Kitchen?
I'm doing that. No one can pinpoint the origin.
But they just called it that, and that's it from now on, yeah?
Yeah.
Because I know why Manhattan's called Manhattan.
Why?
Because the people there, mainly gentlemen, used to wear hats. So they were saying that's the man in Hatton.
Wasn't it New Amsterdam originally?
Yeah, I made that up about the hats.
Oh. Anyway, to rewind, that was the worst anniversary ever. It was our 11th anniversary, and we had a great time together. You know when you just go somewhere with someone, and it's not really about where you go; it's about going there with them.
Yeah, and that's what I got out of it. I heard that you probably went to the most god awful place possible, but you went to the most god awful place possible with the most special person possible, which is lovely.
Yeah, I once was stressed about filling a 4-hour commercial radio show, and my producer at the time had some suggestions for me of like what to do, and I didn't like any of them, and I was like 30 minutes short, and it was coming up to the time the show started, and he said, when people are listening, it's not about what they're listening to, it's about being there with you. And so our anniversary is maybe a metaphor for this show. Everything we say or do, Tony, is terrible, but I think people are here with us for the same reason I wanted to go. Staten Island's a metaphor for this show. As long as you're with us, it doesn't matter where you are or what we're doing.
I feel like the metaphor is that beach full of garbage.
That too. Tony, thanks for being here.
David, always a pleasure.
That's our show. Thanks for tuning in. I will see you Monday. And this is going well, I think. I shouldn't have said this is and then the name of the show, because then you have to say this is twice. I'll stop talking now.